Ladies and gentlemen, I will call this meeting to order of the Utah Board of Water Resources. I am Charles Holmgren, Chairman of the Board of Water Resources. We welcome you this morning to this August 9th board meeting. Appreciate your attendance here today. I would like to recognize some individuals that provided a tour and meals for us yesterday as we toured many of the projects the Board of Water Resources has funded in the Weber Basin District. I'd like to thank Kyle Stevens, board member, who took charge with Assistant Director Todd Stoneley, and for their great efforts. We had a very successful trip. Would also especially like to thank Weber Basin Water Conservancy District for their efforts, Compass Minerals on the Great Salt Lake, and Utah Parks and Recreation's manager James Morgan at the Willard Bay facility in Box Elder County that we toured yesterday as well. So with that, I would ask my fellow board members, when you speak, to speak directly into the microphone for the recording purposes, please. And we will move into our first agenda item, which is approval of the minutes of the June 21st, 2018 briefing and general board meeting. So,
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion we approve the minutes.
Mr. Jim Lemon makes a motion to approve the minutes from the June 21st board meeting.
I'll second it.
Blaine Ibsen seconds the motion. Any discussion on the motion of the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Are the same. Motion passes unanimously. We'll move into special item reports, and our first special item is L581, Murray City Authorization and Committal of Funds, and that is in the Salt Lake County area. And Mr. Russell Hadley is representing the division, and we have with us today Mr. Danny Astill from Murray City. We have, I believe that's Denise Steck from Murray City. We have Mr. Craig Bagley from Bowen and Collins. And if I can get my fingers to work, Mr. Matt Dugdale from George K. Bond and Company, representing Murray City this morning. So with that, we will turn the time to Russell Hadley and have him make a presentation on behalf of Murray City.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The project is in Murray City in Salt Lake County. The applicant serves culinary water to 10,374 connections, including 8,912 residential connections. The system consists of 19 wells, 8 springs, 12 million gallons of storage in 5 tanks, 11 booster pump stations, and about 197 miles of transmission and distribution pipelines. No secondary water is provided. However, the 2 city-owned golf courses are irrigated with secondary water from local irrigation companies. 2 of the applicant's wells, the 45th South well and the Park well, were drilled by cable tool in the 1960s. Over the years, sand infiltration into the well has gotten progressively worse, requiring the wells to be throttled back significantly to avoid sand destroying additional pumps and bowls. During one event, 180 feet of sand filled the 45th South well and caused substantial damage. Both wells originally produced close to 1,000 gallons per minute each, but at present, neither can sustainably yield 200 to 300 gallons per minute. Many of the applicant's pipelines are lead-jointed ductile iron pipes over 30 years old, with some pipes possibly going back to the 1940s. Over 49 breaks have been recorded since the applicant has been keeping records. Long-term plans have been made to replace all older pipes in the system. The busy streets of 9th East and State Street have had 9 breaks in the last several years. The applicant is requesting financial assistance from the board to replace the Park well, the 45th South well, with modern screened wells drilled with rotary drilling methods. Assistance is also being requested to replace about 12,900 feet of the priority water main lines in 8 to 12-inch sizes on 9th East and State Street. Engineering assistance will be provided by Bowen Collins and Associates. Benefits of the project include developing 2 functional, reliable wells that will be capable of pumping about 1,000 gallons per minute each. The new transmission and distribution pipelines will provide a safer, more reliable water supply with fewer catastrophic breakdowns, as well as additional capacity. All right, the recommended cost sharing. Benefits of the project include the 2 failing wells will be replaced with modern, reliable wells with pumping capacities of 1,000 gallons per minute, and the new transmission lines will provide a safer, more reliable supply with fewer catastrophic breakdowns and add capacity. Recommended cost sharing and repayments are the Board of Water Resources supplying $8,054,000. The applicant will provide $1,421,000 for a total project cost of $9,475,000. Because the applicant has a large existing debt payment through 2024, it is suggested interest-only payments be required until the first full payment begins in 2025. Staff recommends the board authorize 85% of the project cost up to $8,054,000, and the bonded indebtedness be returned at 1% interest over 25 years with interest-only payments for the first 5 years and regular annual payments of approximately $382,000, including reserves, beginning in 2025. Based on the board's water service affordability guideline, residents of Murray City could pay up to $47.64 monthly for water. As shown, the cost of water with the proposed project, based on 8,912 residential connections, would put the applicant above the board's affordability guideline. The applicant has been aggressive in promoting reduced water consumption. A Water Sense rebate program is offered for installing low-flow shower heads and toilets. A Fix a Leak Week rebate program is offered for installing low-flow shower heads and toilets, or to fix leaks. A Shower Better Month offers free low-flow shower heads. A conservation-focused newsletter is included with billings, and a water conservation demonstration garden is underway. City-owned sites have been re-landscaped with WaterWise landscaping, and the state goal of a 25% conservation rate by 2025 is being pursued. And that is staff's report.
Thank you, Russell. You folks from Murray City have additional information to provide the board this morning?
I think Russell has done a very good job in reporting what we have given to him. We just, first of all, Mr. Chairman, we appreciate the time that you've given us today, as well as the board members being here. Murray City, we have tried to, over the years, always tried to meet the state's goals with beginning with slow the flow and different activities. We sponsor the fourth grade classes in all of the Murray School District with water conservation curriculum, and we bring in a special group that does that. We partner with our power department that does an energy efficiency curriculum as well. We recently instituted a tiered rate system that I don't know if you watched the 5 o'clock news last week, but I ended up being there. We really are striving to encourage our citizens to save these resources. We don't purchase water from any other agencies. We have the ability to do that, but we don't. We have these wells and we have our springs, and we try to protect them the best that we can. And these are two critical sources that we need to bring back online. Fortunately, we do have additional wells that we brought online for the peaking season, and so far we've had no issues. But having these additional or these wells back online is important to us to have backup to provide the essential services to our city. And with the institution of our conservation rate, the tiered rate system, we also had a rate increase that established a long-term, at least for the next 5 years, plan to pay for capital projects, which included a bonding to tackle some of these large projects. And as I talked with Russell during the interview process, I looked at the savings that we might get, and obviously these wells are offline right now, so putting them back online will be modernized and I think more efficient with new motors, but the savings there comes really through our education and water education and water conservation practices. The other parts of these projects are these main lines that are in state rights of way, and they're the most difficult to deal with, and we find every year there's a new process that UDOT is requiring of us, and to fix these lines, and so I took a look at just the last 2 years of the water breaks that we've had in some of these UDOT rights of way, and developed a cost. And so the last 2 years, just the 5 that happened in the last 2 years cost $135,000 to repair and to restore based on their criteria. And so we're really looking forward to updating these and getting these lines built to our new standards for corrosion resistance and going forward for the long term. So hopefully that gives you additional information.
Thank you, Mr. Estill. Yes, Denise.
So with regard to our finances, we had budgeted during this long-term plan for cash flow, and this low-interest loan assists that cash flow for us to accelerate some of these projects ahead of what that 20-year replacement project is. I don't know if you're familiar with Murray, but we have a large redevelopment going on in downtown within the next 5 years that we believe will revitalize that area by the Desert Star Theater. It's the historic Murray area, and these water lines are critical to bringing in some of that development. And again, they are in state-owned properties or UDOT-owned properties. So we appreciate the consideration. It does allow us to have a stronger cash flow so that we can have some of those capital projects come out a little quicker than what they would if we had normally gone through this. We probably would have not had this loan to jumpstart, would have had these projects go on over a 10-year period, whereas now we can accelerate them and have them within a couple-year period and be able to complete some of that development as well as provide the services that we need for our residents. So we appreciate your consideration sincerely.
Great. Yes, from Bowen and Collins, do you have any other comments or? Okay. Very good. Any questions from the board for, yes, Shalane?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, but I have a clarification I just want to make. The motion states the bonded indebtedness will be returned at 1% interest over 25 years, and then it mentions the interest-only payments for the first 5 years. That's not actually accurate. There will be 25 years of payments of the approximately $382,000. That is what the actual motion is, 1%, 25 years, approximately $382,000. There may be 6 interest-only payments, but that isn't actually part of the bond repayment 6. So the payments, $182,000 payments beginning in 2025. Then there are 25 of those payments. So it's not interest-only payments for 5 years and then 20 payments of the other.
It's 25
That's not
after.
what this is. This is a 25-year repayment with principal interest and reserves. And you'll be having these 20 payments until 2025.
That's right, 25 years.
Okay.
So you're talking a 30-year agreement?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why this is different, because it's not an agreement, it is a bond.
Right.
The bond will simply state that principal and interest payments will begin in 2025. That every year before then, they'll have to make payments.
But the bond is for 25 years.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Before their first payment starts, they'll have 5 years of interest only.
Well, they might have 6.
Well,
because it's 28 points. So that's why I'm making the clarification. It's a 25-year bond.
Okay.
From 2025.
Is Murray City comfortable with that clarification? Okay. Any questions from the board for Murray City or Russell or Shalane?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes.
On this 12,900 feet of pipeline that you're going to upgrade that you've just mentioned, you've had several breaks in the critical areas with UDOT. This 12,900 feet of new pipeline, does that include all of your problem areas you've had with UDOT right-of-ways?
Yes.
So that will take care of hopefully your critical, where you had 5 in the last couple of years, it cost you 100 whatever thousand. That should resolve that issue.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question also. It's kind of a loaded question, but we've seen of late increased costs for construction and such. And so the question is, with the amount of money that's being requested at this point in time, would you be coming back? You know, I mean, when you go out to bid, get your bids in, that type of stuff, coming back to the board for increased funding, or would you be able to handle that increased funding within your own financial reserves?
When we had our engineers look at that, we had that. Oh, there we go. When we had our engineers look at that, we phased all of these projects, and so the wells first and then the water lines after that. So we loaded it and looked at those costs and accelerated the costs as the years went on. So we recently we're under construction right now in one of the UDOT right-of-ways. So we have a pretty good handle on the current costs. So we've anticipated that those future costs to come with that, not knowing for sure what that will, but we did put an inflationary factor built into that.
Good. Other questions for the Murray City folks? Thank you, Kyle, and thank you, Blaine, for your questions. Juliet, are you prepared to make a motion?
Yeah, yes, I might need Shalene to help me a little bit, but before that, Mr. Chairman, I ask just one question. Sure. So thank you for helping us to kind of understand what this means in terms of accelerating some of those projects. I think, when we're kind of thinking about that revitalization of Murray and just economic development in the state, getting that stuff faster while we're kind of at the end, we're kind of in the last stretch of the economic expansion, right, is I think really important. So thank you for kind of helping us to understand that. In the same vein, this question's probably for Matt. Can you help us understand if Murray were to go to the market with these types of terms, kind of what rate they'd be looking at, just ballpark?
Sure. It's
so we're going at 1%.
Yes, market rates would be higher, certainly, and I would guess under a 25-year structure, it'd be between 3.5%.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Chair, thank you. I think I'm ready to make a motion, but you'll have to make sure I've got the motion right.
Yeah, so Shalene watches closely.
Okay, excellent. Okay, I would like to make a motion that we authorize 85% of this project cost up to $8.054 million, and that, this is where it's tricky, the bonded indebtedness be returned to us with interest-only payments through 2025. Through 2024, and then after that, 25 years of principal and interest payments at 1% interest of approximately $382,000. Excellent, including reserves. Yeah, no, it's okay. No, okay, yeah.
I believe they're also asking for middle today. So the board needs to authorize.
And in addition to authorization, I would also make a motion that we commit the funds today.
Excellent, Juliet. Perfect.
I'll second that motion.
Kyle Stevens seconds the motion. Is there any more discussion on the motion from the board? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Murray City. Appreciate it. We will now be moving up to item E392, Woodruff Irrigating Company, for additional funds. We have with us today President Wes Tingey of Woodruff Irrigating Company, Mr. Stephen Huffaker, Secretary of Woodruff Irrigating Company, and Mr. Chad Brown from Franzen Civil Engineers, and Mr. Tom Cox from Division of Water Resources will make a presentation for us.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the Woodruff Irrigating Company provides irrigation water to the area around the community of Woodruff in Rich County. They have 3 storage reservoirs. If you look on the map, this is Woodruff Reservoir here. And then in another drainage, there's Birch Creek number 1 and Birch Creek number 2. In March of 2017, the board's committed funds for a project to breach Birch Creek number 1 and install a drain at the downstream end of the outlet of Birch Creek number 2 to address pressing seepage issues. The applicant feels it'd be cheaper to breach Birch Creek number 1 than to repair it. So when funds were committed, the applicant was hoping to do the breach on Birch Creek number 1 before the water season, but the weather didn't permit them to do that. And so they just put the whole project out to bid in the fall of 2017. They only received one bid, and that was a lot higher than they expected. So we kind of regrouped and just put out the project out to bid again. They decided to separate the two projects. So Birch Creek number 1 was bid about a month and a half ago, and Birch Creek number 2, the bids were open just last night. Those bids came in considerably higher than was anticipated. And it's just, I guess, the atmosphere of the contractor world right now. It's just everything's coming in higher. And also because of the materials testing and other issues, and as well as putting the project out to bid 2 times, the engineering is higher than a normal project. So we have up here the committed cost sharing and the proposed cost sharing, which was based on the actual bid, so they should be pretty solid. We have added in even a little bit of contingency onto those. So now we're looking at a total project cost of $840,000. And staff recommends that the board commit an additional $319,000 and amend the purchase agreement to state that the board will provide 85% of the project cost up to $714,000, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 30 years with annual payments of approximately $23,800. And it's 0% interest because it's coming from the revolving fund, and their applicant is really getting no financial benefit, so that's why we gave them as long of repayment period as we could. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that's staff's report.
Thank you very much, Tom. Chad, Wes, Jim, anything to add to the sad story here?
It is and has been an expensive pain in our necks, but there's nothing else we can do. So that's where we are. We have the bids, so we know what the costs pretty well are. So we don't have a very long window to complete the project because winter sets in fairly quick where we are. So we hope to get started quickly, but it's a difficult project for us. It's very expensive for a small irrigation company like we are, but that's where we are.
Okay. Chad, do you have anything to add? Any questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
I've got a
Blaine.
question. I'm just curious, what was the thought process behind separating the bids into 2 bids? Because that added additional costs to prepare the 2 bids. What was the thought process?
Yeah, so the repairs needed at Birch Creek number 2 are to address a leak around the outlet of the dam, and also requires the installation of a filter and drain system. And so the construction of that is a more technical project that requires a contractor that has experience in that. There's dewatering. It's a different type of construction than just earthwork, mass moving of earth from the breach of Birch Creek number 1. And so when we had bid it last year, we felt that by putting them together, we weeded out some local contractors that were interested in doing the breach of Birch Creek number 1. And so this year we split it out. We got a local contractor that can do the earthwork and just move the material out of the breach area of Birch Creek number 1. But then to do the repairs of Birch Creek number 2, the more technical construction, we got a contractor along the Wasatch front that's coming to do that work. And so that's the reason, is that it is two types of construction processes.
Any other questions? Yes, Steve.
For the applicant to come up with $126,000 on a small irrigation company is very difficult.
Yeah.
How are you going to go about that? By raising the assessments or in-kind work, or?
That will basically be done by assessments, and it'll put local farmers going to their banks to get loans to handle that.
What is your assessment now?
It'll raise the assessment about $20 per share to cover that in 1 year, which is difficult for small farmers.
It is.
But we have talked of getting bridge loans, but the consensus of the board was that people would get their own loans to handle it, probably. So it is difficult. It'll be difficult 1 year to handle that. We haven't talked to the whole membership, but the board was very concerned last night about that. So,
being a president of an irrigation company, I would be concerned too.
I am. It's caused me sleepless nights.
Yes, Randy.
I might, since Dave's in the audience, do you have any comments, Dave, you'd like to add? I mean, this is tied in somewhat with dam safety, and just want to allow Dave a sec, if that would be okay with the board, if you'd like to add any comments, Dave.
Mr. Dave Marble, Division of Water Rights, Dam Safety.
Sure, thank you. I'd be happy to weigh in on this a little bit. We're very much supportive that the project needs to be completed. Birch Creek number 1 has really got some significant maintenance problems, issues, and some leakage issues that really need to be addressed for safety purposes. And so we think that the decision by the company that's probably easier to just breach that one is probably a pretty good decision. But there are some safety issues that simply need to be addressed with that. On Birch Creek number 2, we're concerned, and it's not light on our part that we are asking the company to do something that we know is going to be very expensive and difficult for a small irrigation company. It is. The leak that we're talking about is a new leak that developed just within the last few years. It was not there until about 3 or 4 years ago, something like that. And the leakage is leakage that's immediately right around the outlet conduit. That is probably one of the most frequent and dangerous failure modes for a dam, is to develop seepage right along that outlet penetration through the dam. And the fact that it's new, it clearly, it begins and ends, before the reservoir gets into the spillway. So we're not sure exactly the mechanism of where that water is exactly coming from, but to have that water coming out around the outlet is really concerning. And so and Birch Creek number 2 is a pretty good size and high hazard structure that would put life at risk. And being such a prominent failure mode, we felt as dam safety that this was something that we had to act on to do something to resolve that safety issue. And so we're very supportive of the project. It's not light on our minds that we recognize the demand that this is taking to the irrigation company, but we feel that the risk to downstream population is just significant enough that this has to be acted upon. And so we do currently have a storage restriction on the reservoir, which takes away how much water the company can store and use and that kind of thing. So there are some real concerns and long-term benefits to them that way as well.
Appreciate that, Dave. I just wanted to hear your opinion, and I just thought we'd pick on you since you happen to be sitting in the audience today.
Thought that might happen. Wasn't surprised.
So thank you. Well, as many of us know, dams, there's always things that show up that we don't really anticipate, and as you open them up, you find, if you do open them up, you find surprises lots of times that you don't expect. So we appreciate dam safety and the work that you do to try to help keep these dams safe. And we know that it's expensive to fix them, but without your storage water, you just really struggle. Right. So we appreciate what you do.
Maybe Dave, do you know how far down the list this dam project is on the dam safety?
That's a really good question, and I should have brought that priority list with me, and I apologize. I just haven't looked at that recently, and I'm not sure if I could tell you. I don't think it's near the top. I think it'll be some time before it really were to come up on the on the priority list. It would probably be some years. would the repairs that we eventually do address this problem? I don't know. With the risk that we have of this seepage along the outlet conduit, we just simply can't wait. This is something that has to be addressed soon. And I think even a storage restriction to keep the reservoir lower is something that in some years they're not going to be able to do. And so I think it's important that it be taken care of.
So what you're implying is that you're going to have stream flows high enough that the outlet ability, you're probably going to fill and spill regardless of restrictions.
I think that there are some years where that could happen. Wes, are you?
If a real wet year, it'd be difficult. The one thing about Birch Creek 2 or Birch Creek 1, reaching for the breach, it doesn't hold very much water, and it seldom spills enough to fill it, so about once in 10 years, so the benefit there. But Birch Creek 2, we've been losing about a third of our storage because of the restrictions, so that's been expensive also. So.
Sure, no, that's understandable, and just wanted to clarify and have a clear understanding.
Not many years that the gate wouldn't handle the flows, but that 1 year, a real wet year, it could.
Well, we get those years, and hopefully next year will be one of them. That would be welcome if next year's one of those particular years, so I hope it is. So thank you for the information.
Yeah, my question, I guess, is, and I discussed this with Chad Brown, and he was saying that as we move forward, will this project still qualify for dam safety funding when it reaches the priority threshold for grant? Or it will still be on the list even though these repairs will be made?
Yes, there are still additional repairs that need to be made, and would still be certainly available from our perspective at some point that those repairs need to be made at some point.
Okay, and the funds invested by the Woodruff Irrigating Company in the meantime go toward their portion of the dam safety project into the future, possibly.
Yeah, right. That's the way I understood it.
The repairs that we're doing now and the design that we've done are to be long-term permanent repairs, and so we haven't looked at the extent of what the full rehabilitation will be, but the plan is what we put in now would be incorporated with the full repair later. And as we've talked with staff, our understanding that this could be applied to that future 15% of the total cost when the dam is rehabbed in the future. That was our understanding, and Tom may need to clarify that, but.
Yeah, we don't believe the work done on Birch Creek number 1 would fall under the minimum standards work, but we would look at what was done on Birch Creek number 2 when the other repairs are made and take that into consideration and use that towards their local cost share.
Okay. Anything else, Wes? Okay. Norm?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that the board commit an additional $319,000 and amend the purchase agreement to state that the board will provide up to 85% of the project cost, up to $714,000, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 30 years with annual payments of approximately $23,800.
Second.
Who made the second? Randy. Crozier makes a second to the motion. Is there any further discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Good luck, gentlemen. If there are any cattle buyers in the audience, you can go up to Woodruff and bid those calves up this fall. It would help. Thank you. Okay. Our next agenda item is item C055, Center Creek Irrigation Company for an amendment in Wasatch County. Mr. Russell Hadley has a presentation here. We don't have folks from Center Creek with us today.
No, they weren't required to come to this meeting, nor their engineer.
Very good.
Nice to see we have Dave and Everett over here, though, because I'm going to be using a few of your photographs. Okay, these reservoirs are about 5 miles southeast of Heber in Wasatch County. The purpose of the project is to rehabilitate the downstream embankment of Center Creek Dam Number 2. This includes the repair of the downstream embankment that is eroded, slip lining the existing corrugated pipeline with HDPE pipe, and installing new outlet works. The gate at Center Creek Dam Number 3 will also be replaced. Additional state minimum standards upgrade work will be completed in the future when dam safety funds become available. And just to remind the board, here's a few photos of what is up there now. This is on dam number 2 and 3 has this same kind of outlet works. It's a horizontal stem that goes through the dam. Again, Steve Farrell and I are there, and not quite sure why they even need a lock on this. I know I wouldn't.
Being from Wasatch County, I know why the rocks.
I know I wouldn't want to be the guy to open this gate. So. It goes through a corrugated metal pipe to the other side of the dam to the gate. And here is the slope there at the outlet gate. You can see it's eroded away. And here's upstream, uphill of that. This is the slope that's going to be repaired on dam number 2. And just a basic plan of the work going to be done on both dam 2 and 3. On 3, the upstream slope is going to have some additional fill added to it to flatten it out a bit, get closer to 3-to-1 slope. Since funds were committed, the project has been bid. The lowest bid was about 25% higher than originally estimated, and additional funding is needed to complete the work. The project cost estimate is increased by $273,000 from $462,000 originally to $735,000 now. The applicant is requesting the board commit an additional $273,000 to the project. The original loan terms were 0% interest over approximately 10 years with annual payments of $4,600. If the board commits the additional $246,000 grant, an additional $27,000 loan, that's the total of the $273,000 increase, staff recommends the grant contract be amended to provide 90% of the project cost up to $662,000, and the loan contract be amended to provide 10% of the project cost up to $73,000, which will be returned at 0% interest over 16 years with payments of approximately $4,600. And that is staff's report.
Thank you, Russell. Questions from the board for Russell Hadley? Seeing none, Mr. Farrell.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that the board commit the additional $246,000 in grant and an additional $27,000 in loan, and amend the contract to provide 90% of the project cost up to $662,000, and the loan contract to be amended to provide 10% of the project cost up to $73,000, which will be returned at a 0 interest rate over 16 years with the payments of approximately $46,000 a year. 4,600. We get it real back real fast. 4,600.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Kyle Stevens seconds the motion. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Russell.
Thank you.
These two? Oh, it's passed. Before we go into our next agenda item, I'd like to recognize guests we have with us today. Mr. Jonathan Perry from Weber Basin Water Conservancy District. Conley Baldwin from Pacific Corp. Paul Blanchard. Good morning, Paul. And again, Dave Marble from Utah Dam Safety. Everett Taylor from Dam Safety. Carrie A. Bruno. Mike Collins from Bowen and Collins. Good to see you, Mike. I know we have a number of other guests in here, but they haven't sent their names up. So, anyway. All right, we'll move into agenda item number 4, dam safety reports. And I guess we go with Tom Cox with that information.
The first one is from the Fremont Irrigation Company. The Fremont Irrigation Company supplies irrigation water to about 12,000 acres from above the community of Fremont to below Bicknell, and secondary irrigation water to the communities of Fremont, Loa, Lyman, Bicknell, and Bicknell. Water is diverted from the Fremont River and various springs, and the applicant has storage rights in Fish Lake and the cursor is not showing up there. So, and Johnson Reservoir just to the north, Forsyth Reservoir, and Mill Meadow Reservoir. The 115-foot high, 700-foot long Mill Meadow Reservoir was constructed with board funding in the early 1950s, but does not meet current state minimum dam safety requirements. Among the problems, back in 2012, a phase 1 of the project, upgrade project, was completed, and that installed a new outlet structure and did a lining of the outlet pipe. But the other issues still remain. The spillway, which is located on the right abutment here, it's kind of switched around because we're looking upstream, but the directions on dams are based on looking downstream. So the existing spillway is on the right abutment, and there's uncontrolled seepage at the downstream toe. So the purpose of this phase 2 of the project is to complete the remainder of the dam safety minimum standards upgrades, which would include installing toe drains at the downstream toe, as well as constructing a new adequately sized spillway on the left abutment and abandoning the one on the right abutment. One of the issues with the existing spillway, other than it being undersized, is that it's located along some steep rock cliffs, and the rocks from that slope would keep falling in, and it's just a maintenance nightmare to keep that open. Okay, so the slide up there shows the proposed cost sharing on phase 2 of $1,950,000. Phase 1 cost about $600,000, and then so the total project cost of both is just over $2.5 million. The dam safety grant of the $540,000, that contract has expired, so a new one is required. So staff recommends the board commit 90% of the cost of Phase 2 up to $1,755,000 as a dam safety grant, and that the existing loan contract be amended to provide 10% of the total project cost up to the $255,000. That's as a loan to be returned at 0% interest over 20 years with annual payments of $6,000 the first 3 years and approximately $14,000 thereafter. The first 3 years, the first 2 payments have been made of the $6,000, and the third one is due December 1st. So that's why the first 3 years are $6,000, and the remaining, the $14,000, covers the balance of those loans. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that's staff's report.
Thank you, Tom. Questions for Tom? We don't have anybody here from the irrigation company, but yes, Randy.
I might pick on Dave again. So with their spillway coming off the opposite side, what's their plans? How are they going to address that?
Thank you. Is there a pointer on this that I can, I don't know, if, will you be able to see it if I I'll look this other way then? Let's see, where's the pointer on this? It's right there. The current spillway is located right here.
Right.
It's a little hard to tell from that aerial photo, but right over top of that is a fairly almost vertical, very steep, high cliff. And there's a lot of rock that rattles off regularly down into that spillway channel. It blocks it off and reduces its hydraulic capacity. And so it's just been a real problem. It's a real problem because it reduces their capacity. It becomes a really big safety issue for them to be able to get in and remove that. And so from that perspective, we felt it was just really better. And the spillway is just undersized too, for that matter. It just doesn't have enough hydraulic capacity as it is. And so the plan now will be to put a new spillway over in this area, and it will come down a drainage down through here and get back into the stream channel there, which will be able to give us the capacity, get it away from that steep slope. The existing channel will stay open through here. Basically will become a rock catch that really protects the dam by giving it a place to collect rock that's coming from that slope and not getting down and hitting and damaging the dam.
So there is a natural drainage that comes
Yeah, again,
off
it's hard to see, but yes, there is a drainage down there.
I just looked at that and I thought, gosh, you're bringing it down the groin side of the other side of the dam, and thought,
yeah, it won't be. You know, the groin is right here, and it's a little hard to see from here. And I think Everett's been working on this project more than I have, but as I recall, it comes down more in this area.
Okay.
So it's more over here then, where it's coming down.
The roadway will be over here.
Come on
sure.
over.
If you will, please.
So the roadway will be realigned. And to maintain access to the dam, the road will be realigned and it'll come up and wrap through here. The spillway channel will come down into this channel and then continue down to the river, returning.
So you're moving it clear away from the dam. That makes much more sense. I just was looking at that as to how you.
That's an existing natural wash there.
Okay.
That will be diverted.
Well, that makes a lot more sense.
No question. We would not want that going down along the groin. That would be create a new safety issue.
Yeah, it was like, like you shoot yourself in the foot, you move it from one side and create yourself another nightmare. And so I appreciate that, Everett. I just was curious where you were going to get rid of your spill. So.
And then if I could just add one more element to this old spillway. During that 2012, after we did the slip lining, we put the new gate on, they did spill and it saturated this slope here that then sloughed down. You can see their outlet discharge here and buried that, and they had to clear that out. Since then, the owner has opted, and with our agreement, to not spill fearing that that slope would saturate again and they'd deal with another slough.
Oh, I could.
So moving the spillway over to the left abutment then eliminates that issue as well.
Well, and I mean, you know, that makes total sense, you know, to move it into that other drainage. I just didn't realize, you know, just looking at the picture and just curious how you were truly addressing that issue. So appreciate that. Thanks, Everett and Dave, for answering that.
Any other questions for Tom? If not, Mr. Ibsen?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the board commit 90% of the Phase 2 project cost up to $1,755,000 as a dam safety grant, and that the existing loan contract be amended to provide 10% of the total project cost up to $255,000 as a loan, to be returned at 0% interest over 20 years with annual payments of $6,000 the first 3 years and approximately $14,000 per year thereafter.
Second.
Thank you for the motion. Who made the second? Randy Crozier makes a second to the motion. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moon Lake Water Users Association. Dex Winterton of the Moon Lake Water Users Association, representing the Twin Pots Dam.
Mr. Chairman.
So Dex and Ben Merritt. Yes.
I need to recuse myself from this project because I am a stockholder that receives water from Moon Lake Water Users Association, so just want you to know that up front.
Thank you for that information, Mr. Crozier. Appreciate that. Ben.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good morning. The Moon Lake Water Users Association owns and operates Twin Pot Reservoir, located approximately 24 miles north of Duchesne on the south slope of the beautiful Uinta Mountains. The reservoir provides water to approximately 75,000 acres of agricultural cropland through 8 different irrigation companies. The Twin Pots Reservoir is under storage restrictions set by dam safety due to structural problems. The outlet works of the reservoir is composed of 3 parts. First, there is the steel outlet structure, which you can see here. Corrosion is causing sort of pitting or boiling of the pipe. After the, I don't have photos of this, but after the steel pipe, there is a gate, which is installed in a wet well. The gate's timbers are rotting, and the gate itself is damaged. They believe that the gate was closed on top of some rocks, and so it doesn't seal properly. And the third part of the outlet structure is this concrete conduit that you see here, and there is severe cracking in that part as well. So so the deficiencies, this project won't cover all the deficiencies with this system, but it will cover what's required to lift the storage restrictions set by dam safety. Cost sharing for the project is a 90-10 split with $207,000 from the Board of Water Resources. Staff recommends that the board commit 90% of the project cost up to $207,000 as a dam safety grant, and this is staff's report.
Thank you, Ben. Mr. Winterton, do you have anything to add to that?
Just like to say, you know, any bit of storage we can have out there is vital to the success of the farmers there, and we appreciate the Board of Water Resources for considering this project.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Winterton or for Mr. Merritt? If not, I believe Mr.
Chairman?
Farrell.
I would like to make the motion that the board commit 90% of the project cost up to $207,000 as a dam safety grant.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Ipson seconds the motion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we will identify that Mr. Crozier recused himself in this action by the board. So thank you, Mr. Winterton and Ben, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item is Ivins City. Mr. Tom Cox will make a presentation.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. In the mid-1970s, 6 flood control structures were constructed at the base of Red Mountain, north of the community of Ivins in Washington County. And cursor's not showing up on the screen. If you look closely, I could use the pointer on yours if we can't get that one to work.
Those remote will be able to see if you drag.
Okay. There we go. So,
thank goodness protected.
So if you look closely, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and number 6 debris basins. And they vary in height from 10 to 20 feet and in length from about 800 feet to number 6 is about 5,500 feet. As you can see, since they were constructed, there's been a lot of development just right downstream from them. So they're now considered to be high hazard structures because of the potential of loss of life or damage that would happen if any of them breached. So in addition to the location, the spillway sizes on those structures do not meet current dam safety minimum standards requirements. So the proposed project is to upgrade those spillways and move some of them around so the spill flow doesn't go right into people's backyards. So it's proposed that the project cost of the $2.1 million, the NRCS will provide 65% of the construction cost, but 100% of the engineering cost for this project. So the NRCS will provide almost $1.4 million, and staff recommends the board commit 31.5% of the project cost, up to $661,000 as a dam safety grant. And Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that's staff's report.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions for Tom on this project? If not, Mr. Lemon.
I would make the motion that the board commit 31.5% of the project cost up to $661,000 as a dam safety grant.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that motion.
Steve Farrell seconds the motion. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Tom. Our next item is C062, Washington County Water Conservancy District. And we have with us today, besides Ben Merritt making the presentation, the General Manager, Mr. Ron Thompson, and Mr. Randy Johnson, Project Manager for the Washington County Water Conservancy District. So welcome, Ron and Randy. Good to see you guys all the way up here.
Be here.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, the Ivins Bench Dam is located just north and west of Ivins, down in southern Utah. Seepage from the dam is significant and has led to dam safety restrictions due to the seepage. The existing tow drain is inadequately sized to capture all the seepage that's coming out of there, and the proposed project includes replacing the existing tow drain with a larger tow drain which will collect the current seepage and will also have capacity for additional seepage should it develop. The tow drain will also be installed with manholes and a video access port, enabling operators to maintain and inspect the tow drain as necessary. These improvements will satisfy dam safety requirements for the existing storage restrictions, but will not cover all the minimum dam safety requirements. Staff recommends that the board commit 90% of the project cost up to $321,000 as a dam safety grant. This is staff's report.
Thank you, Ben. Ron, Randy.
Let me just give you a small history. This dam this year is 100 years old. And most of this board won't remember, but many years ago we piped water from Gunlock Reservoir and took out 3 major irrigation companies' open ditches and put them under pressurized irrigation. And this dam right now is fundamental to providing the water supply and providing head to particularly the Santa Clara companies. We also have the ability in that system now to pump reclaimed water back up into this dam where we mix and blend it with water out of the Gunlock Reservoir, so it both is receiving from the Gunlock and the Santa Clara, but also from reclaimed water from a wastewater plant down below Bloomington. It's fundamental what we're doing. There's been several upgrades to it over the years. We just recently replaced the spillway completely. Frankly, this came in at much higher price than we had expected, and that's why we're here asking for a grant. So thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Marble has a comment he'd like to make.
Thank you. And again, we're very much supportive of this project. Something, just a detail that I thought you might be interested in, especially as to why is this particular tow drain replacement being approved under the minimum standards program, or why is it being proposed that way as opposed to just a maintenance item that the owner is responsible for. And the reason for that is that really, again, probably more than 20 years ago, we really did some rehabilitation work on this dam, putting in a deep soil mixed wall through the dam. This tow drain was actually placed during that time, so 20-some years ago it was placed as part of the minimum standards rehabilitation program that we originally did. And then since then, apparently that there was a defect in its installation, and so it's now plugged with sediment and non-functional. And so what we're really doing with this project, I think, is taking a portion of a project that was done 20-some years ago through the same process, and that is just not functioning properly. And so we're going back and just replacing and fixing that up so it will function as originally proposed and designed and built.
So what size of drain's being installed this round? So you're going from a 4-inch to a 10-inch and probably a little higher quality filter material around it and whatnot, I would assume, as you redo it.
Definitely better filtering and that kind of thing, which will prevent this from happening in the future.
Well, that makes more sense, because I was curious why even 4-inch was even installed. That's a pretty small drain. So.
We were just starting. We wouldn't do that today.
Oh, well, I would hope so, because that just seemed awful small to be putting a 4-inch tow drain in. It's kind of like throwing rocks in the
You're
pond.
absolutely right. Yeah.
that helps answer that question, because I was a little baffled why you would even have a 4-inch drain in there. You know, if you was draining the foundation around the house, I could understand, but not the toe of the dam. Okay, just curious. And not to pick on Ron, but we might have a future manager sitting in the back. His grandson's with him. Would you introduce your grandson? And you know,
yeah, this is my grandson, Tylen. Stand up. He's will be a sophomore this year at Dixie High School. Cool. And sharp young man, a 4.0 student, and very involved in FFA and in livestock projects, both with the family and of his own. So glad to have him here. He's always been around water and has an interest in it.
Well, you just never know he'll grow up in this line of the field, and we just appreciate you bringing your grandson with you and exposing him to the system, and just want you to feel welcome, young man, with us today.
Thanks, Randy. Any other questions for Ron or Randy or Ben from the board? And I guess I appreciate the explanation by Dave, letting us know that this is kind of a continuation of a project that was done a number of years ago, and that explains things a little better for me anyway. So, Mr. Lemon.
I would make the motion that the board commit 90% of the project cost up to $321,000 as a dam safety grant.
I'll second that motion.
Mr. Norm Johnson seconds the motion. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Ron and Randy and Ben. Appreciate you coming up for the meeting. Moving on, we go to agenda item number 5, the Lake Powell Pipeline Report. And I suppose Mr. Joel Williams will make a presentation there.
I suppose Ron could have stayed up here to make sure I don't mess this up, but we are happy to give the board another update. Unfortunately, there's not a lot to report on this time. We are still awaiting a jurisdictional decision from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, if you can believe it. So we're not twiddling our thumbs, though. We continuing to work with the project stakeholders, both local interest groups and other federal agencies and the Kaibab Band of the Paiute Tribe, meeting regularly with these groups and agencies to make sure that they understand where we're at in the process. One item that is moving forward, the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, is working on their an amendment to their resource management plan in Arizona for a congressional utility corridor, congressionally designated utility corridor that our pipeline would use to cross that portion of Arizona. So they're working on an amendment that we're watching closely and glad to see that work taking place. One other item I will mention is we are working also on a contract amendment for our contract with Stantec. When we originally set that up, it was designed for 20 months, and that will expire at the end of this year. And being that we will still need additional permitting work to get us through the permitting phase, we're working on a contract amendment to provide some additional time and funds to get us through this permitting phase. So we'll be coming back to the board for a motion on that when we get it prepared, but that's just something that we are working on. I don't know if you've got any questions for us right now.
Idea of when they may make a decision?
We were all feeling good about that July 19th meeting. We'd heard some rumblings that, oh, this may be it, and then it didn't happen, and so we just don't even know now when the commission will decide. Their next meeting won't be until September, We know that they are down a few commissioners. I think they currently have 4.
Down 1, right?
Oh, they're only down 1? Okay.
My understanding is that they have a nominee named for that, but I don't know how long the process will be to place them.
Okay. And we are obviously working on anything we can to find out anything we can do to move it forward, trying to talk with other federal agencies that work closely with FERC. We've had our congressional delegation talk with them to say, hey, when are we going to find out? Can we move this on? And we're looking at any other way we can to move things forward while we're waiting for this determination. So. Yep.
Thank you, Joel. Appreciate the report, and I'm sure Conley Baldwin in the back was really interested to hear about how well FERC works for us as well as for him.
Thank you.
All right, we have agenda item number 6, which is the Bear River Development Report, and some action we need to take on a memorandum of understanding as we get to the end of this discussion. Mr. Director.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, we've talked to you a few times about a possible agreement with the Utah Transit Authority, and we continue to be in discussion with them regarding a multi-use corridor in Box Elder County. And this region is of interest, of course, due to future water supply needs, specifically tied to the Bear River Development Act and future public transportation projects. The agreement, as referenced in our May board meeting, is nearing finalization and will be made official in coming weeks. So the Division of Water Resources and UTA staff believe this will be a mutually beneficial effort, minimizing future impacts to citizens and saving taxpayers money. This effort is focused on preserving right-of-way ahead of development. Future projects would be subject to NEPA processes, and staff will provide updates as more information becomes available. So while the division is entering into this memorandum of agreement with UTA, the funds for right-of-way acquisition would be committed by the board as this process moves forward. So staff's request is that the board make a motion approving the division director to enter into this MOA.
Thank you, Director Millis. Any questions for Director Millis on this item? If not, Mr. Stevens.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the motion that the Board of Water Resources approve the Division of Water Resources entering into a memorandum of agreement with Utah Transit Authority to preserve right-of-way for multiple-use utility corridor.
Thank you for the motion. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Mr. Lemon seconds the motion. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Our next agenda item is agenda item number 7, which is a planning report on hydrology and modeling on the Weber River. And Mr. Tony Melcher is our presenter today.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it's good to be with you. As was mentioned, my name is Tony Melcher, and I'm here to kind of introduce a little bit the hydrology and modeling section, and also talk a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing in the Weber River Basin. So to start off, what is the hydrology and modeling section? So we operate, hydrology modeling section operates under the planning branch of the Division of Water Resources. We are 7 engineers and 1 engineering technician. We work under the direction of Craig Miller, who is our section manager. Now, I haven't been with the section for very long. I haven't been with the division for very long, only essentially since the beginning of the year. But from what I've been able to glean, working in the hydrology and modeling section requires expertise in hydrology and the hydrologic cycle, water resources management, mathematics, and computer programming. So we're a pretty nerdy group, I would say. Some of the current projects that we work on are the water budget model, the water demand model for the state, weather modification or the cloud seeding program, and also models for various river basins, which is actually what I've been asked to speak on today. So what's been happening in the Weber River Basin? So the Weber Basin Water Conservancy District recently received a SMART grant, or a water grant. Is that what it's called? Water SMART grant. There we go. Water SMART grant from the Bureau of Reclamation to analyze their system and to determine how resilient their system is to drought. And so that's kind of where we came in. The Weber River Basin model has existed for a number of years now, and it includes 8 different reservoirs: Smith and Morehouse, Rockport or Wanship, Echo, Lost Creek, East Canyon, Causey, Pine View, and Willard Bay. It also includes essentially 19 different service areas, ranging from the Weber-Provo Diversion Canal to GSL minerals or Compass minerals like we saw yesterday in the tour. Now this is kind of what the model looked like initially. Essentially a few hundred lines of code and a really simple basic interface. It worked really well. It was very efficient, but one of the challenges with this model is that it was difficult to model multiple different scenarios. The model today implements the Riverware software, which was developed out of the University of Colorado. It's a little bit more appealing, a little more aesthetically appealing. It also helps us run those different simulations, considering different hydrology scenarios, as well as different consumption and operation scenarios. So how is the Weber River Basin model being used? So as I mentioned, the Weber Basin Water Conservancy District is revamping and writing their drought contingency plan. So we were asked to run some of these drought action and drought response scenarios. Drought action scenarios are performed before a drought occurs. Drought response is performed during the drought or with the onset of a drought. Some of those scenarios include increased surface storage, hypothetical reservoirs along Chalk Creek, and also a gravel pit reservoir right along at the mouth of the canyon. Increased groundwater storage in aquifers, and also wastewater reuse along the Gateway Canal. Some of the drought response scenarios included managing demands by implementing restrictions on secondary agricultural and municipal industrial water use. So to go into this scenario, basically what we look at is the total basin storage. So all 8 reservoirs, the total storage in each one of those reservoirs, and we look at the total basin storage on June 1st. if that storage value falls somewhere between roughly 373,000 acre-feet and 413,000 acre-feet, then subsequent demand reductions are made. In secondary water, 20%, agricultural irrigation, 20%, and M&I culinary outdoor water, 20%. And that corresponds, I should mention, that corresponds with a yellow, what's being called a yellow advisory code. The orange advisory code corresponds when total basin storage is 313,000 acre-feet to 373,000 acre-feet on June 1st. I should mention, so there are two criteria for these advisory codes. There is a total basin storage criteria and also a total upstream storage criteria, which essentially excludes Willard Bay from that calculation. So total upstream storage at June 1st, if it falls between 168,000 acre-feet and 208,000 acre-feet, then a 60% secondary water reduction would be implemented, a 40% agricultural irrigation reduction would be implemented, and then 60% for M&I and 10% culinary indoor water. Now, in the case of an extreme water shortage, which corresponds with a red advisory code, this would mean that there is less than 313,000 acre-feet in total storage on June 1st and less than 168,000 acre-feet on June 1st for total upstream storage. This would require a 95% demand reduction for secondary water, 70% for agricultural irrigation, 95% for M&I outdoor water, 33% for indoor water. And a second scenario under the drought response scenarios is crop fallowing or fallowing, which would be implemented in the case of an orange advisory code. In addition to these drought action and drought response scenarios, we also looked at multiple hydrologic scenarios. We looked at multiple climate change scenarios. 5 in particular, we looked at a warm wet scenario, a hot wet scenario, a warm dry scenario, a hot dry scenario, and then somewhere in between, a central tendency scenario. In this figure here, we have months along the bottom, along the x-axis, and along the y-axis we have flow in acre-feet per month. Each one of these different climate change scenarios looks at, you might notice, I do have mouse. Okay, you might notice that each one of these climate change scenarios models an earlier peak in our hydrographs as opposed to the base scenario, which is shown in blue here. We also modeled a paleohydrologic scenario. Now, this paleohydrologic hydrology was derived from a joint study with BYU, Utah State, the U.S. Forest Service, and Columbia University. It's based on pinyon pine and Douglas fir tree ring chronologies, and it allows us to reconstruct flows from 1429 to 2004. So now, in conclusion, just to brief you on some of the results that we're finding, we found that some of the greatest benefit to the Weber Basin system occurs during the drought management scenario and also during the fallowing scenario. And also from these modeling efforts, we were able to improve the demand reduction thresholds. So that yellow, orange, and red advisory codes, we were able to kind of revamp those and help the Conservancy District try and make more sense of those. And that was in that case, it was especially beneficial to have that paleo record where we were able to go back to 1429 and really look at some of those historic droughts. On the left, so what we have here are two figures. Along the x-axis, we have date ranging from 1429 to 2004. And along the y-axis, we have total storage on June 1st in thousands of acre-feet. Now, the old thresholds that the district initially began with are shown on the left. And you'll see that in nearly 600 years of storage records, we didn't meet a red advisory code once. However, based on these modeling results, we were able to kind of revamp those thresholds, and on the right are the newest and I believe most recent thresholds that the district is implementing. So I see that as a success. So how will the Weber River Basin model be used in the future? One thing that we're really excited about is that we are in the process of working with a number of different agencies, JUB engineers, Western Water Assessment, along with Utah State University, to go more in depth with these climate change scenarios. We've been asked to run the Weber Basin model for, I mean, initially we just ran it for 5 different scenarios, but I think we're looking at somewhere along the range of 60 to 100 different climate change scenarios to really make this, this drought contingency plan more robust. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tony Melcher. Any questions for Tony?
Mr. Chairman, I've got a question or two. Did this, the model, was it run just for the water rights owned by Weber, the Conservancy District, or what about all the other water rights, and did it factor in water rights and priorities and all that sort of thing?
No, we did not account for water rights. This is more an operational model. So it essentially looked at how reservoirs would need to be operated in order to supply sufficient water to each service area, but we did not consider priority dates or any sort of other accounting in that method.
Okay.
Which it may be done in the future, however. That might be how we expand on the model.
Wouldn't that be necessary to add any credence to your study?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Candace?
Real quick, it does, in the rules, it does set up a general priority of it. It doesn't have specific priority dates for each specific water user, but they are compiled into kind of an aggregate water user that does get water in order of how they should. So it's not as fine resolution going down to individual water users. But it does consider that on a more aggregate scale.
Yeah.
Kyle?
Just curious, how did you go back and establish 1429 as the beginning date?
So I'm not entirely sure. That was the study done by BYU and USU, but I believe that that's just maybe potentially the age of the tree that they could find in the area. I mean, it essentially fits a regression line based on the width of the tree rings, determining whether or not it was a good water year or not such a good water year.
Are the results of that study available? I'd like to see that study.
They are.
Are there any down in southern Utah, for instance, or what was the range of this study? What geographic area did this study do? And I'd be curious about some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was used to reconstruct flows at the Weber Basin at Oakley gauge. Stream gauge. But yeah, I could provide you with that reference if you'd like.
I'd like that.
Randy?
What's the prediction?
I say, what's your prediction of when we, based on this historical graph, when do we go the other way?
When do we turn out of it? Well, that's a slightly political question. I'm not sure. That's a tough question. I think it's a
question as to curious of what,
It's a good question.
As a
That's a good question.
Are we, do you think we're going to trend out?
Well, a lot of these climate change scenarios, they predict more spring rainstorms, less snowpack, and I think we can all attest to the fact that that's been the case the last few years.
So Except when you're too wet, you're going to be too dry, as we have always been.
In other words, he didn't want to answer the question.
Sure. Any other questions for Tony?
No, anyway, it's interesting.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate that report. We will now go to a water conservation report by Marcy Larson. Marcy, thank you for coming and doing a report.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Let's throw this up here real quick. Okay, so today I would like to discuss with you about our program of Utah Water Savers, and that is our program that does statewide rebates for smart timers. A little bit of history is we were allocated ongoing funds this year by the Utah Legislature and Governor's Office of $750,000. Some of that money goes towards administrative fees, such as overhead costs. And Jordan Valley had developed Utah Water Savers as a portal for their users to go in and get rebates. And so they were gracious enough to allow us to kind of tag along with other Conservancy districts for one central place for citizens to go and find rebates available to them. So far, we've received 4,310 rebates for smart timers. We have been able to process 3,629 of those. And since May 1st, when we launched Utah Water Savers for statewide rebates, we have sent out $234,036.62. And so that's just a little less than 25% of the overall cost of the $750,000 that we have available. To raise awareness of this program, we've used the platform Slow the Flow, along with Facebook posts and Pandora Radio. And here's one of our commercials, if it will let me play it.
Saving goals should be celebrated, like installing a smart water sprinkler timer or planting water-wise plants. Go! With big rebates and smart timers, you are bound to have that winning feeling, and while saving up to 25,000 gallons of water every year. Slow the flow, save H2O.
That was one of our commercials that we partner with RSL. With Slow the Flow, to talk a little bit about the rebates available. And so that's our report as far as where we're at with Utah Water Savers. Do you have any questions?
Questions from the board for Marcy?
No question, but a comment. I'm one of the ones that did purchase one of the smart controllers, and I've already received my rebate back. But one of the things that's interesting is I went through, and it's the Beehive version, the one Home Depot and whatever. But one of the things I've observed is, I put in all of the criteria, the type of soil and that type of stuff, and it seems like I'm using more water this year than I did last year when I just did it manually. So I've got to adjust something.
Yes, we've heard that smart timers are only as smart as we allow them to be. So,
okay, thanks, Todd.
Todd will be your guy.
If you don't use the funds, do they turn over into next year?
They do.
And you have ongoing funds, or is this a one-time?
These are ongoing funds.
Okay. So you can spend it eventually, huh?
Yeah.
Just prior to this year, we had some one-time monies, and we started some rebate programs with that. A lot of the districts got somewhat overwhelmed with all of the rebates, and so part of this money was to help develop this portal that Kyle, I assume, went and used to help all of the districts process these rebates much faster. And so we had part of a year of practice on it, and now we're going for it, and we're excited to head into the next several years. So
I was just curious, is this available to private well owners, or just do you have to be part of a culinary district to participate?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I believe they can get this rebate.
I didn't know. I'm just curious. I'd never heard anyone comment. You know, there is a lot of little, you know, I mean, it's a small number, but there is a lot of private individuals with just individual wells, and didn't know if we were trying to help address those as well as the districts or not. Just didn't know how it worked.
Yeah, we can look further into that and make sure that we get you.
You know, I think it'd just be nice to have that information, and if it is available to them, it ought to be listed on this site or something. You know, I don't know if it is or not, but it's just curious to see.
Definitely. Yeah, this year has definitely been more so targeted at Utah residential homes for smart timers, but
well,
inside a big district.
And these are all residential homes. They're just water rights that they have a private well, rather than being part of where culinary systems aren't available.
Yes.
Just curious if there was criteria that allowed you to do it with those individuals as well as those individuals.
I believe there is, but we'll check on it and get back with you.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions for Marcy? If not, thank you, Marcy, and thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
For the update on that project on water conservation. We'll now go to agenda item number 9, which is the director's report, and we will turn to our director, Eric Millis, for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I just have a couple of items to report on today. Last week, the beginning of the week, the 7 Colorado River states met in Midway and discussed the drought contingency plans and how we will get everything together to get those plans completed by the end of the year in accordance with, well, what we need to do, but in accordance with what Commissioner Brenda Berman has challenged and asked us to do. And so I just want to report that those meetings were very good and that things are coming together. I think we've got agreement by everybody on the overarching concept and even a lot of the details, but there's still some details that need to be worked out, but nothing that seems to be anything of a problem. It's just details. The lower basin states want to be sure that the upper basin states are able to verify efforts that they are making to guard against drought. For example, the demand management piece of the program, the upper basin states would like the ability to store that water in Lake Powell and do that over time, because based on the system conservation pilot program that we ran over the last few years, and amongst the 4 upper basin states only getting about 40,000 acre feet over several years, we believe that it would take us several years in order to build up enough storage to make any difference in our efforts to keep Lake Powell from going down and hitting a critical elevation. So we'd need several years to do that. That was something that we needed to sell to the lower basin states. They actually were very agreeable with that. They've got something similar in their area. They call it intentionally created surplus. And so we got through that. They wanted to be sure that if we were going to do that sort of a program and store water, that we were able to verify that that water was being taken off of land somewhere temporarily and shepherded to Lake Powell and actually getting there. And of course, the upper basin states themselves are very interested to be sure that each other are able to verify. And so we've had discussions with the state engineer's office, and we need to continue to work on exactly how we do that, but believe that is something that's also very possible. So I think those were probably some of the major points of the discussions that we had, was this demand management storage and the need to verify everything that goes on with that. So we think things are going well. The other thing that is going on, we've continued to meet with the 3 Bear River Commission compact states, Wyoming, Idaho, and Utah, along with Pacific Corps, about these Bear Lake storage filings that the state of Idaho and the state of Utah made. And we continue to meet with stakeholder groups who are interested in what we are planning to do. In fact, we're meeting with a group today that represents homeowners around Bear Lake this afternoon. But we continue to have those meetings, and I think one of the big meetings that we had recently was with Pacific Corps, and talked about what it is that the 3 states need and what it is that Pacific Corps needs, and just trying to come to an understanding of that and how we can help each other get the things that we need. For the states of Utah and Idaho, a lot of it was shoring up the water supply, and if there was anything that could be done to help existing users, that's what we'd like. For Pacific Corps, it was the spinning reserve potential at the Soda Springs power plant. And so we're working together to figure out how we can help each other with those things. We're also we also put together a group that will assemble a model for the entirety of the Bear River Basin. That's something that doesn't exist at this point, and something that will be very helpful, not only for this effort, but for many other things that go on with the Bear River. So I would like to also just add thanks to Weber Basin Water Conservancy District, and to Davis and Weber Counties Canal Company, and to Compass Minerals for the excellent tour and for the hospitality that was shown yesterday. And with that, that's my report.
Eric?
Yes.
So is Arizona seeming to be a better, friendlier player than they were for a time frame?
That's a great point, Randy. Thank you for bringing that up. The state of Arizona and Central Arizona Water Conservancy District sat next to each other at the table and nodded their heads. Yes, and our understanding, and from what we can see, is that things are being worked out in the state of Arizona.
Well, that's good, because when one player doesn't play fair, it creates friction with everybody. So
yep.
Glad to hear that they're working together.
Thank you, Eric. Any other questions for the director in his report? If not, again, I'd like to thank, again, Weber Basin, and for allowing us to use this facility today for our board meeting. And I'd like to thank the board members who are here with us today. Appreciate all of you folks. And for the staff of the Division of Water Resources and all the work you do for the people of the state of Utah, and for this board that makes us do a better job all the time. One guy that probably never gets thanked, and it's sort of a mixed blessing, but Paul Gedge and his great efforts on getting us recorded properly. I appreciate the difficulties he goes through moving to outside venues, and the efforts he makes to keep us legal. So appreciate you, Paul. Thank you. With that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay, Jim Lemon makes the motion. This meeting is adjourned till our next one.